On a stifling night, a businessman returns exhausted from a trip and finds the light in his mother's room on, a detail that makes him uneasy. As he goes upstairs, he finds his wife kneeling beside the bed, smiling nervously, and later discovers a wooden box with medicines and hidden documents. Investigating further, he sees footage of his wife applying liquids during the night and finds altered prescriptions. Suspicion becomes certainty. Someone is weakening the matriarch. With evidence in hand, he decides to act. The crack opened by distrust may reveal a betrayal that will change the family forever. The heat of London seemed even more suffocating on that March night. Richard Alistair loosened his tie as soon as he stepped out of the taxi, feeling the weight of the business trip on his shoulders. He had returned 2 days earlier than planned from the meeting in Edinburgh, after managing to close the most important contract of the quarter for Alistair Industries. All he wanted was to sleep in his own bed, away from hotels and conference rooms. The house in Belgravia was silent when he turned the key in the lock, too silent for a Tuesday, at 11 at night. Richard dropped his suitcase in the entrance hall and noticed that something was different. The light on the second floor was on, that amber light coming from his mother, Mrs. Helen Alistair's room. He frowned. The caregiver, Carmen, only worked during the day, from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening. Who could be up there with her at this hour? He climbed the stairs slowly, feeling a growing unease in his chest. The wooden steps creaked under his feet, and he could hear a hurried movement coming from the room. When he reached the half-open door, what he saw paralyzed him for an instant. His wife, Marina, was kneeling beside Mrs. Alistair's bed, her hands busy underneath the furniture, as if hastily hiding something. Her face was tense, an expression Richard had never seen before. "Marina, you startled me," she said, quickly standing up and tucking her blonde hair behind her ear. Her smile seemed forced, artificial. "I thought you weren't coming back until Thursday." "I managed to get things done early," Richard replied, entering the room and looking at his mother, who was sleeping deeply, her breathing heavy and irregular. "What were you doing?" "The sheet got tangled under the bed. I was just tidying it up," Marina said, wiping her hands on her trousers. "You know how your mother gets bothered when things aren't perfect." Richard looked at her for a long moment. Marina was a qualified nurse. She had left her job at St. Thomas Hospital 3 years ago to care for Mrs. Alistair when the symptoms began to worsen. She had always been dedicated, attentive, organized. But at that moment, something in her blue eyes didn't match the simple explanation she offered. "How is she?" he asked, approaching the bed and touching his mother's cold hand. "Sleeping well. I gave her the medicine at 9, as always." Marina crossed her arms. "You look tired, Richard. Why don't you go rest? I'll take care of everything here." He nodded slowly, but didn't leave immediately. His eyes scanned the room, searching for something he couldn't define. The dresser was organized, the medicines aligned on the silver tray, everything in its place, everything too perfect. "All right," he finally said. "I'm going to sleep. Good night, Marina." "Good night, love." Richard went downstairs with a weight in his chest that he couldn't explain. He took a quick shower but couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, reliving the scene he had just witnessed. Marina's nervousness, her hands hiding something under the bed, that smile that didn't reach her eyes. Why was she so startled by his arrival? At 2 in the morning he got up. The house was in absolute silence. He climbed the stairs again, this time without making a sound. Mrs. Alistair's room door was closed. Richard waited a moment, listening. Nothing. He slowly turned the doorknob and entered. The bedside lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. His mother continued to sleep, motionless. Richard knelt beside the bed in the same spot where he had seen Marina hours earlier. He ran his hand underneath the furniture and felt something solid. He pulled it out carefully. It was a dark wooden box, the size of a shoebox, without a lock. Richard held it in his hands, feeling its weight. His heart sped up. He looked at his mother, still deeply asleep, and then at the box. Something inside him screamed to open it immediately, but another, more cautious part stopped him. He put the box back exactly where he found it and left the room. He lay down in bed again, but sleep didn't come. He kept thinking about what could be inside that box. Medicines, documents. Why would Marina hide it? The following days were strange. Marina seemed to avoid him, always busy with some task, always attentive to Mrs. Alistair's medication schedule. Richard started paying more attention. His mother slept a lot, more than usual, and when she was awake, she seemed confused, disoriented. The doctor, Dr. Felix Morgan, an old family friend, had said it was natural for her age. Mrs. Alistair was 72, and symptoms of fatigue and dizziness had been worsening over the past 6 months. But Richard began to notice small things. The way Marina held the tray with the medicines, always with her back to him. How she insisted on being the only one to prepare her mother-in-law's evening tea. How she blocked visitors, saying Mrs. Alistair needed absolute rest. One afternoon, he was in the company office when he received a call from Connie, a former household employee who had worked with the family for over 20 years. Mrs. Alistair had dismissed Connie the previous year, following Marina's recommendation, who said the house needed less commotion so as not to tire the elderly woman, but Connie still called occasionally, asking about her former employer. "Mr. Alistair, I need to speak with Mrs. Helen," Connie said, her voice tense. "She's resting, Connie. You can call later." "No, sir, it's just that I've been trying to call for days, but Mrs. Marina always says she can't answer. I just wanted to know if everything is all right." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. "Everything is fine. Yes, I'll ask my mother to call you when she wakes up." But she didn't call. And when Richard mentioned Connie's call to Marina, she became visibly irritated. "Richard, you know your mother needs peace. Connie fills her head with neighborhood gossip. It's not good for her." He didn't respond, but the feeling that something was wrong only grew. That night, after Marina slept, he returned to his mother's room. This time he opened the box. Inside were vials of medicine, some with labels he didn't recognize, folded documents, prescriptions with scribbled handwriting, and notes, small pieces of paper with handwritten instructions. One of them said something that made Richard's blood run cold. "Do not discuss with the patient. Administer as per M's instruction." Richard quickly closed the box, his hands trembling. Monsieur Marina. He looked at his mother, who was sleeping heavily, and felt a wave of panic mixed with anger. What was happening in that house? What was Marina doing to his mother? He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the armchair in the room, looking at the door, waiting to understand, waiting to have the courage to face the truth that was beginning to unfold before him, dark and frightening like the night itself that refused to pass. 6 months earlier, the house in Belgravia had a completely different rhythm. Mrs. Helen Alistair woke up early, had her coffee with grilled bread, and read the newspaper on the veranda. At 9 sharp, her driver, Mr. Jenkins, took her to Alistair Industries, the electronic components factory she had founded with her husband, Anthony Alistair, in the 80s. Anthony had passed away 5 years ago, a victim of a heart problem. Since then, Mrs. Alistair had solely led the company alongside her son Richard. She was respected by everyone, a woman of grit, determined, with a gaze that tolerated no nonsense. Even at 72, her mind was sharp, her decisions precise. Marina had entered Richard's life 3 years earlier at a medical conference in Brighton. She was a speaker, talking about palliative care and geriatrics. Richard was impressed by her intelligence, her serene beauty, her calm way of speaking. They married 6 months later in a discreet ceremony in the garden of the Belgravia house. Mrs. Alistair had some reservations at first, not about Marina specifically, but about the short courtship period. "You barely know this girl, Richard," she had said at the time, but Richard was in love, and Mrs. Alistair, despite her doubts, blessed the union. Marina proved to be an attentive daughter-in-law. She helped with family gatherings, organized dinners, and talked with Mrs. Alistair about business. She seemed genuinely interested in the company's history, in Anthony's memories, in the struggles the couple faced to build everything from scratch. But it was when the symptoms began that Marina truly stood out. Mrs. Alistair began to experience dizziness, inexplicable fatigue, episodes of mental confusion. Dr. Felix Morgan ordered a series of tests, but nothing conclusive appeared. "It's age, Helen," he had said, adjusting his glasses. "The body is asking for rest." Marina then offered something that seemed like the perfect solution. "Richard, I can take care of your mother. I have experience. I worked for years in geriatrics at St. Thomas's Hospital. She'll be better at home, with someone from the family." Richard accepted immediately. It seemed like the ideal answer. Marina left her job, dedicating herself entirely to her mother-in-law's care. She organized the medication routine, medical appointments, and meals. Mrs. Alistair began to stay home more, less at the company. Richard took on more responsibilities in the business, confident that his mother was in good hands. But Mrs. Alistair began to feel that something wasn't right. At first, they were vague sensations, difficult to explain. The tea Marina prepared every night had a strange taste, more bitter than normal. She mentioned it once, but Marina laughed and said it was the new chamomile and lemon balm tea, good for sleep. After drinking the tea, Mrs. Alistair slept deeply. Sometimes she woke up the next day remembering nothing, as if she had blacked out. Other times, she had confused nightmares, blurry images that made no sense. One night, she decided not to drink the tea. She pretended to drink it, but when Marina left the room, she poured the liquid into the fern pot next to the bed. That night, Mrs. Alistair slept less but woke up more lucid. Her mind was clearer, her thoughts more organized. The next day, she observed the fern pot. The leaves were withered, yellowish. That made her uneasy. Was it just a coincidence? She waited a few more days, and the plant continued to die until it dried completely. Mrs. Alistair then called Hilda, the cleaning lady who had worked in the house for 15 years. "Hilda, I need you to do something for me," she said, in a low voice when Marina wasn't around. "Tonight, when Marina brings me the tea, I'll save a little. I want you to smell it and tell me what you think." Hilda agreed, worried. That night, Mrs. Alistair saved a little of the tea in a small glass and hid it in the dresser drawer. The next day, she showed it to Hilda. The employee smelled it and made a face. "It has a strong smell, Mrs. Alistair. It smells like medicine. It's not normal." The two looked at each other in silence. A growing fear filled the room. Hilda didn't know what to say, and Mrs. Alistair didn't know whom to trust. How could she accuse her own daughter-in-law without proof? How could she tell Richard something that seemed absurd? Meanwhile, Marina subtly isolated Mrs. Alistair from the outside world. She filtered calls, saying her mother-in-law was resting. She blocked visits, explaining that the doctor recommended absolute rest. Only one person refused to give up: Yvonne, Mrs. Alistair's longtime friend, a 70-year-old lady who had known the family since the difficult early days of the company. Yvonne called almost every day, and Marina always answered with the same excuse. "Mrs. Helen can't talk right now, she's sleeping. Can you call later?" But Yvonne began to suspect. Every time she called, Mrs. Alistair was sleeping, every single time. She decided to go personally to the house in Belgravia. She rang the doorbell 3 times in a week, and all 3 times Marina greeted her with a polite but cold smile. "Today is not a good day, Mrs. Yvonne. Helen is very tired. But I just want to see her for 5 minutes. Perhaps next week would be better." Yvonne would leave but always returned. She knew Mrs. Alistair too well to accept that isolation without questioning it. There was something wrong in Marina's blue eyes, something that didn't match the professional smile she always offered. Richard, immersed in company problems, didn't notice these subtleties. Alistair Industries was going through a phase of expansion, negotiating contracts with multinationals, opening new production lines. He fully trusted Marina. She was a nurse, dedicated, loving. Why distrust her? But small inconsistencies began to appear. One afternoon, Richard came home early and wanted to bring a fruit plate to his mother. Marina intercepted him in the hallway. "Let me take it, love. You know your mother prefers that I handle these things. It's just a fruit plate, Marina." She smiled, but her eyes didn't follow. "I know, but she gets confused when too many people enter the room. Dr. Morgan recommended keeping the routine stable." Richard handed over the plate but kept thinking, since when did his mother get confused by his presence? That didn't make sense. Another time, He wanted to enter the room to get a document his mother had stored. Marina again appeared. "She's sleeping, Richard. Can you wait until later?" "I won't wake her. I'm just going to get a paper." Marina hesitated, but finally let him. Richard entered and saw his mother deeply asleep, her breathing heavy. It was 3 in the afternoon. He frowned, took the document, and left. In the hallway, he looked at Marina. "Why does she sleep so much?" "The medicine, Richard. Dr. Morgan said it's normal. She needs to rest to recover." He nodded, but the uneasiness remained. That night, he called Dr. Felix Morgan. "Felix, do the medicines you prescribed for my mother cause a lot of sleepiness?" "Well, the sedative has a mild sedative effect, but nothing extreme." "Why?" "She's been sleeping a lot, sometimes 10, 12 hours a day." I'll check the dosage. Maybe it needs adjusting." But when Dr. Morgan called the house to speak with Mrs. Alistair, it was Marina who answered. She assured him that everything was under control, that she had already adjusted the dosage according to previous instructions. Dr. Morgan, trusting the nurse's competence, didn't insist. Richard began to write things down. The times his mother slept. The moments Marina seemed nervous. The times Yvonne called and couldn't speak with Mrs. Alistair. He still didn't know what it all meant, but he felt he was assembling an invisible puzzle piece by piece, slowly revealing an image he dreaded to see complete. Richard couldn't get that note out of his head. "Do not discuss with the patient. Administer as per M's instruction." The words echoed in his mind during company meetings, during breakfast, during sleepless nights. He needed to understand what was happening, but at the same time, he was afraid of what he might discover. One dawn, around 3 o'clock, he woke up thirsty. He went down to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and was returning when he heard footsteps upstairs. They were light. "Careful." Richard went up slowly, avoiding the creaking steps. He saw Marina leaving Mrs. Alistair's room, carrying a tray with an empty glass and some vials. She didn't see him. She went to the hallway bathroom. Richard heard water running, the sound of glass clinking against the sink. Then something fell to the floor and rolled. Marina murmured something low, bent down to pick it up. But the vial continued to roll, passed through the bathroom door, and stopped under Mrs. Alistair's bed. Richard quickly returned to the room, pretending he was still asleep. Minutes later, Marina entered, lay down, beside him. It took her a long time to fall asleep. He could feel it by her irregular breathing, by the way she moved in bed. The next day, Richard woke up early. Marina was still sleeping. He went to his mother's room and looked for the vial under the bed. He found a small amber bottle with a faded label. The name of the medication was illegible, but there was a handwritten label. 2 drops, do not exceed. He put the vial in his pocket and went to work. During lunch, he called a pharmacist friend, Ronald, who owned a drugstore in Camden. "Ronald, I need you to identify a medication for me. Can I stop by?" "Of course, Richard. Bring the vial." At the drugstore, Ronald examined the vial, smelled the contents, made some notes. "It's a sedative, Richard. Quite strong, by the way. Normally used in hospitals for severe anxiety cases or preoperative procedures. It's not something you take at home, especially not without rigorous medical supervision." "What if someone takes this every day?" Ronald frowned. "Depending on the dose, it can cause extreme drowsiness, mental confusion, disorientation, short-term memory loss. In the long term, it can seriously compromise health." Richard felt his stomach churn. "And if they stop taking it? The person will probably feel better, more lucid, but if they've been on it for a long time, there might be some mild withdrawal effects, tremors, anxiety." Richard thanked him and left the drugstore with the vial in his hand and a tightness in his chest. He returned to the company, but couldn't concentrate on anything. He called home, and Marina answered. "How is my mother?" "Sleeping, Richard." "Why?" "Just wanted to know. I'll be there in an hour." "All right." But he didn't go home. He went to a nearby cafe and thought. He couldn't simply confront Marina without more evidence. She could deny everything, invent any excuse. He needed something concrete, indisputable. That night, Richard installed a small security camera in the hallway leading to his mother's room. It was a discreet camera, one of those that look like a smoke detector. He set it to record only when it detected movement between midnight and 6 in the morning. 2 days later, he checked the recordings on his office computer with the door locked. The first night showed nothing abnormal. Marina didn't leave the room. But on the second night, at 2:47 in the morning, she appeared in the hallway entering Mrs. Allister's room. Richard turned up the volume. There was no very clear audio, but he could see Marina opening a small bag, taking something out, pouring it into a glass. She stirred carefully, then put everything back. Then she bent down, hid something under the bed, and left. Richard felt a wave of anger and sadness at the same time. He saved the video in 3 different places, including in the cloud, and decided it was time to open that box again. That same night, he waited for Marina to sleep and returned to his mother's room. He took the wooden box from under the bed and carried it to his office. He locked the door and opened it. Inside were vials of medicines he didn't recognize, prescriptions with Dr. Felix Morgan's signature, but the handwriting seemed strange, shaky. There were also notes, handwritten instructions, and something that made Richard's heart race, a copy of Mrs. Allister's blood test, dated 2 months ago, showing elevated levels of sedatives in her system. But what shocked him most was a yellowed, sealed envelope, with his mother's handwriting on the outside. To Richard, open only in case of urgency. He opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, written in Mrs. Allister's elegant handwriting, but with some blurred words, as if she had written with difficulty. My dearest son, if you are reading this, it is because something has happened to me, or because you have finally realized what I have been feeling for months. I don't know if I'm going crazy, if I am imagining things, but I need to write this while I still have clarity. Marina is giving me something. I don't know what, but I know it's not normal. I feel trapped in a fog, unable to think straight, to communicate. I tried to talk to you several times, but she is always nearby, always watching me. My son, I never wanted to be a burden in your life, but if you are reading this, please investigate. Look for Yvonne. She knows things I didn't have the courage to tell, and know that no matter what happens, I have always loved you more than anything in this life. Your mother, Helen. Richard had to hold back his tears. He read the letter 3 times, each word piercing his heart like a sharp blade. His mother had asked for help, and he hadn't noticed. He had trusted Marina, believed in her words, in her smiles, in her dedication. He photographed everything, all the vials, all the prescriptions, all the notes. He sent the photos to a personal email that only he accessed, and then also sent them to Yvonne with a short message. Mrs. Yvonne, I need to speak with you. It's urgent. Please, keep these photos in a safe place. Yvonne responded in less than 10 minutes, even though it was 4 in the morning. Richard, I knew something was wrong. I will keep everything safe. Look for me when you can. I will pray for you all. Richard put the box back under the bed, making sure it was in the exact same position. He returned to the room and lay down beside Marina, who was sleeping deeply. He lay staring at the ceiling, feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and determination growing within him. The next day, he woke up with a plan. He couldn't simply accuse Marina without absolute certainty of everything. He needed unquestionable proof, reliable witnesses, medical reports, and he needed to protect his mother at all costs. During breakfast, he acted normally. He talked with Marina about trivial matters, the meeting he would have that day, his nephew's birthday on the weekend. She seemed calm, smiling, as always. After Marina went upstairs to care for Mrs. Allister, Richard called Dr. Felix Morgan. Felix, I need to talk to you personally. It's about my mother. Can it be today? Of course, Richard. Come to the office at 3. I'll be there. At the office, Richard showed him the vials, the prescriptions, Mrs. Allister's letter. Dr. Morgan turned pale. Richard, I never prescribed these doses. These prescriptions. The signature looks like mine, but it's not me. Someone forged it. Was it Marina? I don't know, but I will request a forensic handwriting analysis, and I will order new tests for your mother immediately. If she has been medicated with these sedatives for months, we need to reverse the situation urgently. Richard nodded. But I don't want Marina to know anything yet. I need to gather all the evidence before confronting her. I understand. I'll schedule the exams for the day after tomorrow. I'll say it's routine. Thank you, Felix. Leaving the office, Richard felt he was finally taking control of the situation, but he knew he needed to act fast. Marina was intelligent, calculating. If she realized she was being investigated, she could destroy the evidence, or worse, intensify whatever she was doing to Mrs. Alistair. That night, he sat beside his mother while Marina was in the shower. Mrs. Alistair was awake, but confused, her eyes glazed. "Mother, it's me, Richard," he said, holding her hand. She looked at him, trying to focus. "Richard, you need to know." "I know, Mother. I already know. And I will fix this. Trust me." A tear rolled down Mrs. Alistair's face. She squeezed her son's hand with the little strength she had, and then closed her eyes again, exhausted. Richard left the room with a heavy heart, but determined. The war had begun, and he would not rest until he protected his mother and revealed the whole truth. The following days were a careful dance between Richard and Marina. He maintained the appearance of normalcy, going to work, coming home, dining with his wife, talking about trivialities. But inside, every fiber of his being was on high alert, observing her every move, every word, every glance. Marina also seemed different, more attentive, more cautious. Sometimes Richard caught her observing him with an indecipherable expression, as if trying to read his thoughts. Did she suspect? Had she noticed the camera in the hallway or realized the box had been tampered with? The tension in the house was palpable, although neither of them acknowledged it aloud. It was as if both were on opposite sides of an invisible chessboard, calculating moves, anticipating plays. Richard began to act. First, he spoke with Yvonne in a discreet cafe in Notting Hill, far from anywhere Marina might appear. "Mrs. Yvonne, I need you to tell me everything you know." The elderly lady sighed deeply, adjusting her coffee cup on the table. "Richard, your mother sought me out about 3 months ago. She was lucid that day, more lucid than I had seen her in a long time. She asked me to keep some documents, said she didn't trust leaving them at home." "What documents?" Yvonne opened her purse and took out a thin envelope. "They are copies of a will, company records, some personal notes. Helen was worried that something might happen to the originals. She didn't say it explicitly, but I realized she was afraid of Marina." "Afraid?" "She didn't use that word, but I felt it. Your mother said Marina was always around, always controlling everything, not letting anyone get close. And there's something else." "What?" Yvonne hesitated before continuing. "Helen told me she had made a new will, without telling anyone. In this will, she removed Marina from the succession. Only you and the charities she always supported remained as beneficiaries." Richard felt an electric shock run down his spine. "Did Marina know about this?" "I'm not sure, but Helen kept the document with her solicitor, Dr. Marcus Thompson. She didn't want it to stay at home." Richard wrote down the solicitor's name and thanked Yvonne. He asked her not to tell anyone about the meeting and promised to keep her informed. At Alistair Industries, Richard requested an urgent meeting with Sylvia, the HR manager, and a person of extreme trust to the family. "Sylvia, I need you to conduct a discreet investigation for me. Personal, not company-related." "Go ahead, Richard." He told her everything, showed her the photos, the vials, his mother's letter. Sylvia was shocked. "My God, Richard, this is very serious. You need to involve the authorities." "I will, but first I need all possible evidence. I want you to investigate Marina's past. Where she worked, with whom, if there's any suspicious history, anything that might help." Sylvia nodded. "I'll put my brother on it. He's a private investigator, completely trustworthy. You'll have a full report in a week." "Thank you, Sylvia." Meanwhile, Richard scheduled a consultation with Dr. Marcus Thompson, the solicitor who handled the family's affairs. Marcus was a 60-year-old man, grey-haired, with thin-rimmed glasses, and an impeccable reputation in London. "Richard, your mother came to see me about 4 months ago," Marcus said, leafing through a thick folder. "She was worried, said she wanted to make some changes to her will." "What kind of changes?" "She completely removed Marina from the succession. She kept you as the main heir and included 3 charities. When I asked why, she was evasive, only saying it was a personal decision, that she wanted to ensure the estate was well taken care of. Does Marina know about this? She shouldn't. The will is registered at the registry office, but it's a confidential document. It will only be opened when necessary. Richard took a deep breath. I need a certified copy of that document, Marcus, and I want it kept in 3 different places. Of course. I'll arrange it today. Leaving the solicitor's office, Richard felt that the puzzle pieces were starting to fit together. Marina had a financial motive. If Mrs. Alistair were no longer present, Marina would expect to inherit a considerable part of the estate. But with the new will, she would receive nothing. Had she found out about the change? Was that what motivated her? That night, at home, Richard decided to take the next step. He would confront Marina, but subtly, testing her reactions. During dinner, he casually mentioned, "Marina, I was thinking of taking my mother for a consultation with another doctor, just to get a second opinion on the treatment." Marina stopped eating, her fork suspended in the air. "Why? Dr. Morgan is excellent. He's known her history for years." "I know, but I want to make sure we're doing everything right. Would you mind?" Marina's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course I don't mind, Richard, but I think it's unnecessary. Your mother is stable, following the treatment perfectly. Even so, I think it's better to consult another specialist." Marina put her fork on the plate with more force than necessary. "As you wish. But I don't understand why you're suddenly questioning everything." "I'm not questioning you, Marina. I just want the best for my mother." She stared at him for a long moment, and Richard saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. It was coldness, calculation, almost a threat. But Marina soon smiled, that professional smile she mastered so well. "All right, love. You're her son. You have every right to decide." But Richard knew he had hit a nerve. Marina was nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. In the following days, he noticed subtle changes. Marina started locking the cabinet where she kept the medicines. She moved some vials around. She was always with her bag nearby, never leaving it in any room unsupervised. She also started using the phone more frequently, always in a low voice, always alone. Richard installed another camera, this time in the home office, where Marina usually stayed when talking on the phone. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but it was enough to capture fragments of conversations. In Mihiwai, one of the recordings, he heard Marina talking to someone, her voice tense, worried. "He's suspicious, I feel it. No, I haven't done anything different, but he wants to take the old woman to another doctor. Yes, I know I need to be careful. Do you think he found out something?" "No, the prescriptions are stored. He can't have seen them. Okay, I'll stay calm. But if he starts investigating for real, we have a problem." Richard felt his blood boil. Someone was helping Marina. An accomplice. Who could it be? Who had access to the fake prescriptions, the controlled medications? He sent the recording to Sylvia, who forwarded it to her investigator brother. "We'll trace the number she called," Sylvia said, "and I already have some information about her past that you need to see." The next day, Richard met Sylvia at a discreet restaurant. She handed him a thin folder with printed documents. "Marina worked at St. Thomas's Hospital for 5 years, but left under strange circumstances," Sylvia explained. "Officially, she resigned, but talking to some people there, I discovered there was an internal investigation into controlled medications that went missing from the geriatrics ward stock. The investigation went nowhere, but Marina left soon after." Richard felt his stomach churn. Was she stealing medications? Nobody proved anything, but the coincidence is great. And there's more. She worked previously at a private clinic in Manchester. There was also a suspicious case there, an elderly patient who had complications after receiving inadequate medication. The family sued the clinic, but the case was hushed up with a financial settlement. Marina was not directly accused, but she was the nurse responsible for that department during that period. Richard took a deep breath, trying to process all that information. Marina had a history. It wasn't the first time she had been involved in suspicious situations with elderly patients. And the phone number? "We're still tracing it, but it seems to belong to a pharmacy technician who works at a drugstore in the East End. My brother is investigating the connection. Great job, Sylvia. Keep going. That night, Richard could barely disguise his tension. During dinner, Marina tried to strike up a conversation, but he responded with monosyllables. She noticed. Are you all right, Richard? I am, just tired. You've been strange these past few days. Any problems at the company? No, everything's fine. She looked at him suspiciously but didn't insist. After dinner, Richard went upstairs to see his mother. Mrs. Alistair was awake, more lucid than she had been in weeks. He sat beside the bed and held her hand. How are you feeling today, Mother? Better, she murmured. Clearer. Richard, there's something I need to tell you. Go ahead. Marina, she's giving me something. I know she is. But now she's changed. She's giving me less. I think she realized you're suspicious. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. I know, Mother. I already know everything, and I will fix. This I promise. Mrs. Alistair squeezed her son's hand with more force than he expected. Be careful, my son. She is not who you think she is. The early morning was cold when Richard awoke to a noise coming from upstairs. It was 4:30. He looked to his side and saw that Marina was not in bed. He got up quickly and climbed the stairs silently, his heart pounding in his chest. Mrs. Alistair's room door was ajar, and a faint light leaked into the hallway. Richard peeked through the crack and saw Marina kneeling beside the bed, rummaging. In a bag he had never seen before. It was a dark canvas bag with a side zipper. She took out some unlabeled vials and a syringe still in its packaging. Richard felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. It was time to act. He pushed the door open forcefully, and Marina turned around, startled, almost dropping the vials. What are you doing, Marina? She quickly stood up, hiding the bag behind her back. Richard, you scared me. I was just organizing your mother's medications. With a syringe at 4:30 in the morning? Marina hesitated. The syringe is for applying vitamin B12. The doctor recommended it. Dr. Morgan never recommended any injections. He told me everything, Marina. Marina's face changed. The mask of a dedicated caregiver disappeared, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. She no longer tried to disguise it. Told you what, exactly? That the prescriptions are fake, that you've been sedating my mother for months, that there was never a prescription for half the medicines you give her. Marina let out a humorless laugh. You don't understand anything, Richard. Your mother was suffering. I was just helping her rest. Helping? You were destroying her, keeping her sedated, confused, isolated from everyone? I did everything for us, Marina yelled, losing her composure. Do you think it was easy to take care of your mother all this time, listening to her talk about her husband, the company, the glorious past, while I had nothing, just the promise of a future she controlled? Richard took a step forward. What are you talking about? Marina threw the bag on the floor. I'm talking about your mother never liking me. She tolerated me, but she never truly accepted me. And when I found out she had changed her will, that she had completely removed me from the succession, I understood that I needed to act. How did you find out about the will? That's confidential. Marina smiled bitterly. Do you think it's hard to find out these things? I have contacts, Richard. People who work in registry offices, in clinics, in pharmacies. People who for a few quid help me with what I need. Richard felt nauseous. You planned all this. The medications, the isolation, everything to weaken my mother. I didn't want it to come to this, Marina said, and for the first time her voice trembled. But your mother is stubborn, resistant. Even with everything I did, she keeps fighting. And you started to get suspicious, to poke your nose where it didn't belong. At that moment, Mrs. Alistair stirred in bed and opened her eyes. Her voice was weak, but clear. I knew. I always knew you couldn't be trusted. Marina looked at her mother-in-law with contempt. You never gave me a chance. From the first day, you treated me like a stranger, an intruder in your precious family. Because I saw who you really were, Mrs. Alistair replied, trying to sit up. A calculating, cold, self-serving woman. Marina took a step towards the bed, but Richard grabbed her arm. Don't come near her. She pulled away forcefully. You don't understand. Everything I did was to secure our future, so we could have a life without depending on your mother's goodwill. You wanted the money, Marina, that's all it was. You didn't care about anything beyond the family's estate. And what's wrong with that? Marina screamed. I deserved it. I took care of her, endured her whims, her orders. The way she looked at me as if I were inferior. I deserved to be rewarded. Richard felt a mixture of anger and sadness. You deserved nothing but affection and respect, Marina, and you had that. But your greed destroyed everything. Marina seemed to realize she had lost control of the situation. She looked around, as if searching for an exit, a solution. Then her gaze fell on the bag on the floor. I can still fix this, she murmured, bending down to pick up the bag. Richard moved faster. He snatched the bag before her and threw it away. It's over, Marina. I have proof of everything. The recordings, the vials, the fake prescriptions, Dr. Morgan's testimony. You won't get away with this. Marina stood still, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then suddenly she started to cry. They weren't tears of remorse, but of frustration, of suppressed anger. I'm tired, Richard, tired of living in your mother's shadow, of being treated like a servant, of knowing I would never be enough. All I wanted was to have something of my own, something no one could take from me. And you thought the solution was to destroy an innocent person, a woman who welcomed you into the family, who trusted you. Marina wiped away her tears, angrily. She never trusted me. She always knew I wasn't good enough for you. Richard shook his head. Don't put that on my mother. The choices were yours, Marina. You chose this path. At that moment, Hilda, the cleaning lady, appeared at the door. She had heard the shouting and came upstairs to see what was happening. Seeing the scene, her eyes widened. Mr. Alistair, is everything all right? Hilda, call the police, now! Marina took a step back, panic taking over her face. No, Richard, don't do this. We can resolve this, we can talk. The time for talking is over, Marina. She looked at Mrs. Alistair, who stared back with a mixture of sadness and relief. Then Marina turned to Richard one last time. Even iron rusts, Richard. No one is strong forever. I just accelerated the inevitable. No, you tried to steal the time she still had, and that is unforgivable. In the following minutes, the house filled with activity. Hilda called the police, who arrived quickly. 2 officers entered the room and asked for explanations. Richard showed them the evidence he had gathered, the vials, the recordings, the documents. Marina remained silent, sitting in a chair, looking at the floor. One of the officers picked up the bag and examined its contents. Unidentified vials, syringes, notes with instructions. Everything pointed to a deliberate and calculated plan. Madam, you need to come with us to give a statement, the officer said to Marina. She stood up slowly, without resisting. Before leaving the room, she looked at Richard one last time. There were no more tears, just an empty, defeated gaze. You'll regret this, she said softly. The only regret I have is not realizing who you truly were sooner. Marina was led away by the police. Richard stayed, by his mother's side, holding her hand. Mrs. Alistair was exhausted, but her eyes shone with a relief he hadn't seen in months. It's over, Mother. You're safe now. Mrs. Alistair squeezed her son's hand tightly. I knew you would find out. I always trusted you, my son. Richard felt tears stream down his face. He had failed to protect his mother initially, but now he was determined never to leave her vulnerable again. The truth had emerged, painful and devastating, but necessary. As the sun began to rise over London, illuminating the room with a soft golden light, Richard felt an immense weight lifted from his shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There was still much to resolve, but the worst had passed. His mother was alive, conscious, and finally free from the invisible prison Marina had placed her in. Hilda brought hot tea and helped Mrs. Alistair sit up better in bed. Richard called Dr. Felix Morgan, explaining everything that had happened. The doctor promised to come to the house immediately to examine Mrs. Alistair and begin the detoxification process from the sedatives. Now it was time to rebuild, to heal, to recover lost time, and Richard was determined to do just that. The following weeks brought a profound transformation to the house in Belgravia. Mrs. Alistair began a slow but steady recovery process. Dr. Felix Morgan closely monitored each stage, adjusting the real medication she needed, observing vital signs and watching the gradual return of her lucidity. Initially, there were difficult moments. The effects of accumulated sedatives in her system caused mild tremors, anxiety, and sleepless nights. But with each passing day, Mrs. Alistair became more present, more conscious, more like the strong woman Richard knew. Richard partially stepped away from the company to spend more time with his mother. Sylvia temporarily took over some of his responsibilities at Alistair Industries, and he was grateful to have trustworthy people around him. Yvonne returned to frequent the house, bringing fresh flowers, books Mrs. Alistair enjoyed, and most importantly, her affectionate companionship. The two friends spent hours chatting on the veranda, reminiscing about old times, planning for the future. Connie also returned, resuming some household duties. She and Hilda formed a dedicated duo, caring for Mrs. Alistair with genuine affection, without ulterior motives, without power games. Marina was formally charged with multiple offences. The police investigation, supported by the evidence Richard had gathered, revealed the full extent of the plan. There were dozens of forged prescriptions, controlled medications diverted from pharmacies and clinics, and an accomplice, Roger Chambers, a pharmacy technician who had supplied the drugs in exchange for payment. Roger was arrested that same week. During interrogation, he confessed everything. Marina had approached him 6 months earlier, saying she needed certain medications for a research project. He didn't ask questions, happy with the extra money she offered. By the time he realized the gravity of what he was involved in, it was too late to back out. The investigation also revealed Marina's suspicious history in previous jobs. The case in Manchester was reopened, and new witnesses emerged, confirming a pattern of behavior that repeated itself. Marina always approached elderly and vulnerable patients, gained their trust, and then found ways to benefit from the situation. Richard followed each development with a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief for having discovered in time, sadness for having been deceived for so long. He wondered how he hadn't noticed the signs, the inconsistencies, the coldness disguised as care. One afternoon, Dr. Felix Morgan came to visit him in the Home Office. "Richard, you can't blame yourself." Marina was extremely skilled. She knew exactly how to appear trustworthy, dedicated, perfect. Many health professionals would have been deceived in the same way. "But I should have noticed. It was my mother, Felix." The doctor placed a hand on Richard's shoulder. "You noticed when you needed to notice, and you acted. That's what matters." Mrs. Alistair, sitting in her favourite armchair with a book on her lap, also offered words of comfort to her son. "Richard, I don't blame you for anything. Marina was convincing because that's what she did best. Manipulate, deceive, create a perfect illusion. You acted with love and courage when you discovered the truth. That's what defines who you are." Marina's trial was scheduled for 3 months later. Meanwhile, she remained detained, awaiting trial. Richard did not visit her. He had neither the courage nor the desire. All he felt was a mixture of anger and disappointment. Alistair Industries continued to operate normally. Mrs. Alistair began returning to the office, first only an hour a day, then 2, then half a day. Her presence reanimated the employees who had missed her. She was the soul of the company, the founder, the visionary, and now she was back. Richard realized that the experience had changed both him and his mother. They talked more openly, shared concerns, listened to each other more attentively. The tragedy had, strangely, strengthened the bond between them. One evening, as they dined together in the living room, Mrs. Alistair brought up the subject they both avoided. "Richard, do you still love Marina?" He remained silent for a long moment, stirring the food on his plate. "I loved who I thought she was, but that person never existed. It was an illusion, a mask. I don't know how to love someone who deceived me so profoundly." Mrs. Alistair nodded. "It's natural for you to feel that way. Grief is not just for the person, but for the idea of the person, for the future you imagined." "I feel foolish, Mother. How could I not see who she really was?" "Because love sometimes makes us blind, and Marina knew that. She used your love as a weapon against you, but that doesn't make you foolish, Richard. It makes you human." That same month, Yvonne organized a special lunch at the house. She invited some of Mrs. Alistair's old friends, people who had been estranged during the months Marina controlled everything. The house came back to life with laughter, lively conversations. Mrs. Alistair seemed to rejuvenate with each visit, each hug, each shared story. Richard observed his mother from afar, feeling immense gratitude for having her back. She was thinner, a little more physically frail, but her spirit was intact, strong, determined, resilient. The investigation team discovered something more during searches of the apartment Marina kept before the marriage. There was a handwritten diary with detailed notes about Mrs. Alistair, about the house routine, about the family's assets. It was evident that Marina had planned everything from the beginning, even before meeting Richard. He was shocked to read some passages. Marina described Mrs. Alistair as an obstacle, a target, a variable. She spoke of the company as a long-term investment. She mentioned strategies to gain trust, isolate the elderly woman, assume control. It was disturbing, almost surreal. Richard showed the diary to Sylvia and to the solicitor, Dr. Marcus Thompson. Both agreed that it was conclusive proof of premeditation. Marina had not acted out of impulse or desperation. She had calculated every step, every action, every word. On the day of the trial, Richard decided to go. He needed to close that chapter, to see Marina face the consequences of her actions. Mrs. Alistair offered to accompany him, but he preferred that she not go. He didn't want to expose her to that situation again. The courtroom was full. Journalists, curious onlookers, family members of other victims Marina had manipulated over the years. Richard sat in the front row, next to Sylvia and Dr. Marcus. Marina entered escorted, wearing a simple outfit, without makeup, her blonde hair tied in a ponytail. She did not look at Richard. She kept her eyes fixed. On the table in front of her, her face expressionless. The prosecutor presented the evidence one by one. The recordings, the vials, the fake prescriptions, the diary, the testimonies of Dr. Morgan, Hilda, Yvonne, Connie, Roger Chambers. It was overwhelming, incontestable. Marina's lawyer tried to argue that she was under emotional stress, that she had acted without thinking clearly. But the diary disproved any claim of impulsivity. That was pure premeditation. Mrs. Alistair was not called to testify in person, but her video testimony was shown. She spoke clearly and firmly about the months of confusion, about the strange sensations after drinking the tea, about the fear she felt but could not express. When it was Marina's turn to speak in her defense, she stood up slowly. For a moment, Richard thought she would cry, ask for forgiveness, show some remorse. But no. Marina merely said that she had done what she thought necessary to secure her future, and that she did not regret having tried. Richard felt a wave of indignation. Even in the face of all the evidence, all the victims, Marina still did not recognize the gravity of her actions. She was trapped in her own narrative, where she was the misunderstood victim, not the perpetrator. The judge deliberated for 2 hours. When he returned, he read the sentence in a firm voice. Marina was sentenced to 18 years in prison for multiple charges, including falsification of documents, irregular administration of controlled substances, and attempted grievous bodily harm. Roger Chambers received 10 years for complicity. Marina listened to the sentence without visible reaction. She did not cry, did not protest. She merely looked at Richard one last time before being led away. In that look, he saw not regret, but resentment, as if he were to blame for having destroyed her plans. Richard left the courthouse emotionally exhausted. Sylvia hugged him in the hallway. "It's over, Richard. Justice has been served." He nodded, but felt no immediate relief, only an emptiness, a deep weariness. The battle had ended, but the scars remained. The following months brought a peace that Richard had not felt in a long time. The house in Belgravia breathed again, free from the suffocating tension that had dominated every room during the dark months. The windows remained open, letting in the sunlight and the gentle London breeze. The garden, once neglected, bloomed again under the care of Mr. Jenkins, who had resumed his duties with renewed enthusiasm. Mrs. Alistair transformed with each passing day. The confused and apathetic woman Richard found sleeping most of the time had disappeared, replaced by the strong and determined matriarch he had always known. Her lucidity was completely restored, her energy gradually returned, and her gaze had regained that characteristic sparkle of intelligence and determination. She fully resumed her activities at Alistair Industries. At first, employees were surprised to see her back, but soon realized it was the same Mrs. Alistair as always. She participated in meetings, made important decisions, guided the team with the accumulated wisdom of decades of experience. The company flourished even more under her renewed leadership. Richard also changed. The experience had made him more attentive, more observant, more careful with the people he trusted. But he had not become cynical or bitter. On the contrary, he seemed to have developed a deeper understanding of human nature, of the masks people wear, of the importance of looking beyond appearances. He began attending therapy with a psychologist recommended by Dr. Felix Morgan. In the sessions, he processed the betrayal, the grief for the relationship that was never real, the guilt for not having realized sooner. Little by little he healed, freeing himself from the weight he carried. One sunny September morning, 6 months after Marina's sentencing, Richard woke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. He got up, put on a bathrobe, and went downstairs. He found Mrs. Alistair sitting in a wicker chair, surrounded by Yvonne, Connie, Hilda, and other friends. They were having coffee and chatting animatedly about old times, about new projects, about life that continued. "Good morning, my son," Mrs. Alistair said with a radiant smile. "Come have coffee with us." Richard joined the group, feeling profound gratitude for that moment. These women had been fundamental at different points in the journey. Yvonne, who never gave up trying to see her friend. Connie, who kept in touch even after being dismissed. Hilda, who had the courage to help Mrs. Alistair when she realized something was wrong. "We're planning a trip," Yvonne announced. "Helen, Connie, and we're going to the Lake District for a weekend. How about that, Richard?" "I think that's a great idea. Mother deserves to rest and have fun." Mrs. Alistair smiled. "We rested enough during those terrible months. Now it's time to live." Those words echoed in Richard's mind. Time to live. That was exactly what both of them needed to do. Not just survive, not just recover, but truly live, enjoy each day, value true connections. That afternoon, he went to Alistair Industries for an important meeting. The company had received a partnership proposal from a European multinational, and Mrs. Alistair wanted to discuss the terms with him. In the meeting room, she was lucid, focused, asking pointed questions, analyzing each clause of the contract with precision. "Mother, you're incredible," Richard said when they were alone after the meeting. Mrs. Alistair smiled. "I feel incredible, my son. It's as if I've come back to life after spending months in a nightmare. Every day now is a gift. You scared me a lot in those months. I scared myself too. There were times when I didn't know if I was going crazy, if I was imagining things, if I was really sick, or if there was something more sinister happening. It was terrifying not to trust my own mind. I'm sorry I didn't realize sooner." Mrs. Alistair held her son's hand. "Richard, you realized at the right time. And when you did, you acted with courage and determination. That's all that matters. There's no guilt in trusting someone you love. The guilt lies with those who abuse that trust." They were silent for a moment, appreciating each other's presence. Then Mrs. Alistair said something she had been holding back for weeks. "You know, son, during those confusing months, when I still had some moments of lucidity, I used to think about everything we built. Your father and I started from scratch with nothing but dreams and hard work. And we built all of this. The key, company, the estate, the legacy. But none of it would mean anything if I didn't have you. The greatest wealth I have is not in the company. It's in having a son who loves me enough to fight for me." Richard felt tears stream down his face. "I will always fight for you, Mother. Always." "I know, my son. And now I also know that we need to be more careful. People like Marina exist. People who see others only as means to achieve their goals. We need to protect not only our assets, but especially our relationships, our trust." "You're right. That night, back at the house, Richard found a letter that had arrived in the mail. It was from Marina. He hesitated before opening it, but his curiosity won out. The letter was short, written in a handwriting he knew well. Marina did not ask for forgiveness, did not apologize. She merely explained, coldly and calculatingly, that she had acted out of a need for financial security that he could never understand. She ended by saying that she did not regret trying, only failing. Richard tore the letter into small pieces and threw it in the trash. There was no longer any room for Marina in his life, nor in his thoughts. She had made her choice, and now she was paying the price. A few weeks later, Richard began going out with friends again, attending social events, opening himself to new possibilities. He wasn't looking for a relationship, but he wasn't closing himself off from life either. He had learned that trusting again was possible, as long as it was done with wisdom and care. Mrs. Alistair also resumed her social activities. She returned to the club she had stopped attending, reconnected with friends who had been estranged, accepted invitations to dinners and events. She was living fully, enjoying every moment as if it were unique. One December morning, almost a year after Marina's sentencing, Richard woke up and went to the garden. He found Mrs. Alistair walking among the flowers, gently touching the petals, smiling to herself. He approached and walked beside her in silence for a few minutes. Then Mrs. Alistair stopped and looked at her son. "Do you know what I learned from all this, Richard?" "What, Mother?" "That evil doesn't always come with hatred or violence. Sometimes it comes disguised as care, as attention, as love. Marina didn't assault me, didn't threaten me. She smiled, cared, organized. But behind that excessive care, there was something dark, something that wanted to destroy me slowly, silently." Richard nodded. "You taught me to distrust masks, Mother, to look beyond what is shown. And you taught me that true love doesn't give up. It fights, it investigates, it protects. You could have believed Marina's excuses. You could have ignored your intuitions. But you didn't. You trusted your instinct and saved my life. We saved each other, Mother." She smiled and held her son's hand. "True, my son, true." They continued walking through the garden for some more time, simply enjoying each other's company, knowing that they had weathered one of the worst storms of their lives and emerged on the other side stronger, more united, more aware of the value of true things. And as the sun continued to shine over the Belgravia garden, mother and son knew that the future was open, full of possibilities, free from the shadows that almost destroyed them. The story had ended, but life continued. And it continued beautiful, true, authentic. Dear listeners, we hope Richard and Mrs. Helen's story has deeply touched your hearts. Sometimes danger comes disguised as care, and we need to be vigilant to protect those we love. To continue experiencing intense emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other equally captivating stories waiting for you. Find them by clicking on the link nearby. If this narrative moved your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave that special like, and share in the comments what you thought of Richard and Helen's journey. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the challenges of human relationships, and the strength of true love. We look forward to reading your comments and knowing which part of the story impacted you the most. Until the next story.